Hey, look, we're back again. That's awesome. And I'm glad you came back too. This is the Sunshine Podcast. It's our usual four here. My name's Levi Johnston. To my right is Pastor Jody Fortner. Across from me is Kenny Hetfield. And to my left is the speaker of the, I was going to say speaker of the hour, but I don't want to encourage him to go that long, is Lee Green. He will be talking to us today. This is the Sunshine Podcast. We are part of Sunshine Free Will Baptist Church here in Huntington, West Virginia. And we're just sort of an outreach of the church here, and we talk about things that we find interesting or find challenging, and we try to challenge each other, and we hope that we bring something of value to you as well. And so right now we're going to listen to what Lee has to talk about to us today, and here we go.
Thank you, Levi. So today I am going to be talking about the topic of eating meat. Is it biblical? Is it not biblical? Now, this is a different kind of topic for me, but I'm doing this for three main reasons. The first reason, and the main reason driving this, is that two unrelated individuals at different times approached me, and in our general conversation, they brought up the topic of eating meat, in biblical terms and stuff like that. So that's the main reason why I'm doing this. The second reason is I wanted to do a podcast that was more informational, not really trying to answer a question or to persuade one way or the other, just giving you some information to think about, to chew on, if you will. Sorry, I know that was bad. Anyways, and the third reason is, well, I needed something to talk about, so that's why I'm doing this. So those two individuals in our conversations, and I'm just going to kind of summarize some of the things that they said. One of them had talked about that he was curious about Leviticus chapter 11 and the restrictions with eating meat or with eating certain animals. And he said that there must be a reason why God set those restrictions in there. And then also in our conversations, the topic of our teeth came up. Based on our teeth, were we designed to eat meat, tear into flesh and stuff like that? So I'm going to try to take a look at these today, and I'm going to begin in Leviticus chapter 11. Now, I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but I'm just going to read a couple verses that kind of gives an example of what the chapter's talking about. So in Leviticus chapter 11, I'm going to start in verse 3. It says, "Whatsoever parteth the hoof, and is cloven-footed, and cheweth the cud among the beasts, that shall ye eat." Jumping down to verse 6. "And the rabbit, because it chews the cud, but does not divide or part the hoof, is unclean to you." So I kind of want to say, before I get any further into Leviticus 11, is that these restrictions here, God gave those to the children of Israel for ceremonial purposes, whether it's ceremonial cleaning or in preparations for the ceremony, not to humanity in general. So while the reasons for these dietary laws are not clearly presented, we do have some insight into why they were given. The dietary restrictions here in Leviticus 11 were mainly for ceremonial cleansing purposes, but demonstrated three important principles. First of all, it was a test or opportunity to obey God and to show separation from worldly or fleshly things. So basically, God said not to do it, they needed to follow it. Much like today, when God lays something on our heart that we shouldn't do, we better not do that, as a show of obedience to Him. Now the second reason showed that they were to take time away from pagan people and practices, as some of these foods or animals were worshipped in pagan religions. So again, this was a time of separation from worldly things and a chance to draw nearer to God. The third reason was to help protect the health of the people, as some of these animals were bottom feeders or scavengers, those that would eat waste products and could carry parasitic organisms or diseases, especially if not handled properly. And it says, there in Leviticus 11, it talks about chewing the cud. Chewing the cud basically means they chew it and chew it and chew it, over and over again in their mouths before they fully swallow it. So they're partially digesting their food before actually swallowing it. This actually led to a cleaner digestion and thus made the meat better for eating. Now, I could go into a little bit more detail about chewing the cud, but it's kind of gross, so I'll just leave it at that. So basically, these restrictions were about separating themselves to God and being ceremonially clean, but there were health reasons also. So, biblically speaking, there were definitely times when it was beneficial to stay away from meat. Either God had said not to do it, so it was in obedience to God, or I think of Daniel chapter 1, where Daniel and his men refused to eat the king's meat because it had been sacrificed to a false god. So they ate vegetables and drank water for 10 days and actually came out stronger. They had a better look about them. So there was definitely health benefits there in Daniel chapter 1 also. So both of these in Leviticus and Daniel showed obedience to God and health reasons. Now, a quick scientific viewpoint. Scientific evidence shows that eating plant-based meals instead of animal-based foods offers significant health benefits, including losing weight, decreasing diabetes, and high blood pressure. Also, the American Dietetic Association says that a plant-based diet is appropriate for any age of life. But for me, I say eat the meat, exercise, and take your chances. So now let's look at a minute at the teeth. I talked about were our teeth designed to eat meat. Some say that since we have canine teeth, that we are supposed to or designed to eat meat. Now, on the other side of that coin, some may say that our canine teeth are very small compared to animals that hunt, so that shows that we're not supposed to eat meat. Now, the shape and size of our teeth isn't always the best factor when determining what we should or should not eat. For instance, most carnivores have canine teeth. They're the long and sharp teeth, and they are used for tearing meat. But teeth aren't always the best way to judge what type of food is eaten. I'm going to look at two different animals and use them for two different examples that might give us something to think about regarding our teeth. And the first animal is the hippopotamus. Now, the hippo has the largest canine teeth of any animal out there. These teeth can be 16 to 20 inches long, but the hippos are truly herbivores. So they only eat plant-based diets. So their teeth don't really dictate that they eat meat. In fact, it's the complete opposite. And also the gorillas. The gorillas are almost exclusively herbivores, meaning they eat fruit, they eat leaves, stems, and stuff like that. But they have large canine teeth also. So this really doesn't have anything to do with eating meat. So the teeth argument isn't as strong as you might think. Well, some may say that we need eat for protein to get strong. Again, I'm going to look at these two animals. The hippo and the gorilla are two of the strongest animals on the planet, and yet they are both completely herbivores. So you can get all the protein, all the nutrients for muscle growth and everything that you need from eating a plant-based diet. So now let's look at a little more of a moralistic view, I guess. Some may say that eating meat also makes us comfortable around blood, and blood is life. So spilling the blood of animals, they say, softens us to spilling the blood of people. And the Bible actually addresses this. Genesis 9:4 says, "But the flesh, with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat." Now previously, before studying this, reading over that, I kind of thought, maybe it is telling us, not to eat meat because it's saying you don't eat anything that has blood in it. Well, I took that verse way wrong because here God commanded Noah that if animals were killed and eaten, that there must be a proper respect for the blood, which represents the life principle. And since we're on the subject of blood, I want to kind of veer off for just a minute and talk about when sin entered the world. When Adam and Eve committed the first sin, what did sin also bring with it? Death. So sin brought death. What brings life? So let me look at our human bodies. If you removed our brain, could a machine keep the physical human body alive? Well, yeah, it could. So if you remove the heart and the lungs and the kidneys and the other organs, could machines keep the body alive? Well, yes. But now, if the blood was removed, could it be kept alive? No, because the blood is where the life is. So if sin brought death, then blood brings life. And it's the shedding of blood, Christ's blood on the cross, brings life back to us. Because sin, we're all sinful creatures, and sin brought death into this world, but blood brings life. So this respect for blood isn't based on mysticism or superstition, but simply because blood represents life and life of the being. When blood is poured out, life is poured out. Throughout the Bible, blood is very important. Blood was a sign of mercy for Israel in the first Passover. Blood sanctified the altar. Blood made atonement for God's people. It sealed the new covenant, and that's what Christ did on the cross. The shedding of his blood sealed the new covenant. His blood justifies us. It brings redemption. It brings peace with God. It cleanses us. It gives us entrance to God's holy place. It sanctifies us and enables us to overcome Satan. So I'm going to close with a couple of passages in the Bible. The first one is Mark chapter 7, verses 15 through 23. And I'm not going to read all those verses, but basically what that passage says is that it's not what goes into someone that defiles them, such as food, but what comes out of them that defiles them. What comes out from their heart, that's what defiles someone. Food just goes into the belly and then is expunged. So this is a matter of the heart. In Romans 14, chapter 6, he says, "He that regardeth the day, regardeth it unto the Lord. And he that regardeth not the day, to the Lord he doth not regard it. He that eateth, eateth to the Lord, for he giveth God thanks. He that eateth not, to the Lord he eateth not, and giveth God thanks." So basically, what Paul is saying here in Romans is that let each of us act as he thinks right before God. If he thinks it's right to observe the days or eat animals, eat meat, let him do so as his conscience demands. If he thinks otherwise, let him not do those things. In such cases, Paul is willing to leave it up to the conscience of the individual. But the key here is that whatever we do, we must be able to do it to the Lord, not using conscience as an excuse for obviously sinful behavior. So, I hope you have gotten some information out of this topic today. Eating meat. Is it biblical? Is it not biblical? Well, it's not mandated that we do it. We don't have to do it. So, vegetarian is clearly a higher way, a healthier way, but it's not forbidden either. Several places throughout the Bible it talks about, God commanding to eat meat, especially in those ceremonial purposes. But there are benefits on either side of that coin. But as for me and my house, we will eat meat.
So did you bring us any meat?
No.
No.
Well, yes. I brought you bacon.
I had sausage.
And sausage. Sorry, Jody.
Again, left out.
So another aspect that was brought up to me was that we were not designed to eat meat because when God designed us, it was in a sinless world. It was before the fall, and no death ever occurred before the fall. So therefore, animals were not killed. There was no shedding of blood. So the argument can be made that we were not designed to eat meat. So what are your all's thoughts on that?
I like meat.
I like candy.
So I guess I would say to that, I've thought about this a little bit, but I've never really looked into it, or I've just thought about it a little bit. And I think that, and this is just my opinion, in that perfect world where death had not entered in, I don't know what I don't know, right? I don't know what happens beyond that in that world. I can't speak to Adam and Eve's kids and so on and so forth and all the things that would happen. I can try to imagine it, and it excites me to a certain extent because that's kind of, maybe I'm assuming too much here, but I believe the new earth is going to be similar to that, to perfection in one day down the road. But as it relates to the meat part, I don't know. I just try to think about it logically and so other animals weren't killing other animals, right? They were there, right? So Were, I don't know, alligators eating plants? I mean, yes, I guess. I don't know. But then sin entered the world. And again, not to say that eating meat is sin, but I just think about, well, what if we didn't eat meat? Well, I know that in West Virginia, the number one auto insurance claim every year is hitting deer. We would be overran with animals if we did not hunt deer in this state and many states across the country. And I don't have an answer necessarily. I just try to think it through as best I can in my simple mind. And I can't see that God wants us to just slay animals mindlessly.
Oh, no.
And so,
Right.
but is that what we would have to do if we didn't hunt deer? Like, would we just have to lay them all out and kill them all the time because they just keep reproducing and reproducing and reproducing that, where's all the vegetation now? It's all gone, I don't know. I just try to think through this. It's an interesting question. I think the way you summarized it there at the end, where the eating of meat was permitted to Noah and, forward from that. And I get the idea that certain people have their own convictions and you don't ever want to cause a brother or sister to stumble because of something like this. That's such a secondary issue. But these kind of questions pop up in my mind too. And I would encourage the person who asked this question that it's a great question and keep coming up with questions because you always want to learn more and grow, but don't let it cause you to stumble into a place that you just don't want to be in questioning certain things, I guess. So it's not a bad thing to question. Just don't let it stumble you in your faith, I guess, when you and don't let someone eating a steak, cause you to stumble. So anyway, that was a long, bad answer, but I don't know. That's my take, I guess.
One of my favorite things I learned, and this was early into learning apologetics, it's more to the biblical restrictions, more so than your other question. But one of my favorite things I learned, and it was bolstered even when I got into college and working on my biology degree, is the restriction on pork and also other meats and stuff like that. But with pork specifically, is that the physiology between humans and pigs are very similar. So a lot of the diseases that they can get, we can get, and vice versa. And so one of the reasons we have to cook pork so long and just make sure that when you cook pork that it's cooked thoroughly is because of stuff like they have a parasite called the trichina worm, and it embeds itself into the muscle of the pig. Well, if you don't cook it enough, that trichina worm has a cyst around it that protects the larva that's in there. And if you don't cook hot enough to destroy that cyst around the larva, then when you eat it, it gets into your stomach acid, and the stomach acid dissolves the cyst that allows it to go through your stomach wall, and it will find itself in or it reproduces or something. I forget right off, but stuff like that. I loved reading about those restrictions because God gave Moses that foreknowledge by putting in these laws of restricting what they ate, not just for the health purpose. The most important reason was that they were set apart from the other nations to honor God, but that added benefit of follow these rules. Don't eat pork because it's going to be unhealthy for you. Can you cook pork hot enough to get rid of all those parasites or other disease? Or, handling, do you raise pigs? And being around them, they get diseases that you can get. So I always thought that was fascinating. Same thing with the hand washing. We didn't wash our hands in America until the late 1800s, even in doctor's office or in hospitals. And we knew about it in Exodus or in Leviticus. So I always find that interesting with meat specifically. And when I got into parasitology in college, it's like, wow, all these things they already knew.
Yeah, same thing with quarantine, being able to quarantine people with, leprosy or contagions, setting them apart. It's interesting that God set that in place because he knew what's going on. I guess my answer, we don't know necessarily. If somebody is strongly convicted over meat, then certainly I'm like Brother Kenny. I wouldn't say, hey, you got to eat meat because, it's okay. At the same time, a lot of things changed because of the fall, not just death, right? Thorns, thistles. So Adam and Eve was always expected to kind of work the ground, but the work became much more difficult after the fall because of all of the things that came about because of the fall. So does dietary needs change then? As you work harder, do you need more protein So is that why God said, okay, this is the meat you're supposed to eat, and begin to give guidelines? And then it gets even freer in the New Testament where he tells Peter, there's nothing unclean. Don't call unclean what I've, called clean. And obviously that was a spiritual thing he was trying to teach Peter. So I think it's hard for us to know exactly what was the original intent. We do know in the beginning, there was no death. So there could not have been any eating of meat because there could have been no killing. But I remember Brother Carl saying, our former pastor a long time ago, and I agree with him, I don't think it took very long for sin to enter the world. I don't think Adam and Eve was there for months, days, years, whatever. And then all of a sudden they sinned, and Brother Carl would say, everybody gets on Adam and Eve because they brought sin into the world. He said, if I was Adam, I probably would have sinned much more more quickly than Adam. So yeah, I just don't think it was a long period of time that they were in that state. Good topic though. I mean, it's a good conversation.
The alligators were relieved they didn't take so long.
They probably didn't even go a day. And then they were eating.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, that was a good discussion, and now it's past lunchtime. We've been talking meat, so I'm very hungry all of a sudden. I don't know about you guys. So let's take a little break, and we'll come back and do a little fun thing.
We hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. We also have the fun thing coming up in just a minute. If you'd like to stop by and see us in person, hear the pastor preach, or join us in Sunday school, we're located at 2111 James River Road in Huntington. You can also visit our website at sunshinechurchwv.org and post a question, a comment, or learn more about us there. We have fellowship breakfasts and dinners too. You're welcome to join us for those. Well, it's time to get back and hear how Levi is going to embarrass the others with the funding. So here we go.
We're back from a little bit of a break and didn't get any meat. So we're still hungry, but we're going to get through this. We can do it. This is the fun thing. And after Lee's discussion about meat and whether we should eat the meat, let's see how good guys you are at discerning the clean from the unclean meats. And this is a free-for-all, so I'll start off with categories, and I'll give you some of the animals in those categories, and you try to discern whether that's like a clean food or an unclean food according to these. And just to kind of drill in this idea, Deuteronomy 5:29 says, "Oh, that there were such an heart in them that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever." So God didn't specifically reveal reasons for the clean versus unclean, but the general conclusions we have is that God wanted the Jews to separate themselves from the pagan and godless cultures around them and set themselves apart in honor and reverence to God. But we can also see that he forbids things that are eating things that aren't good, so like decomposers and scavengers or even predators, so they're eating stuff that can retain the sickness in them, and then when we eat it, and so we get it too. So there's a good evidence for that, I guess. And I have a quote here from nutritionist David Mines. "Could it be that God, in his wisdom, created certain creatures whose sole purpose is to clean up after the others? Their entire calling may be to act exclusively as the sanitation workers of our ecology. God may simply be telling us that it's better for us believers not to consume the meat of these trash collectors." So that's just some food for thought. Food! I did a food pun. All right. That wasn't a pun. I don't know. So, first category, flying animals. Which of these flying animals do you think are clean or unclean? We'll start with a bat.
Unclean.
Yeah, a bat is unclean.
So I get that point.
We're not doing any points.
I know.
I'm just kidding.
It's the rat of the sky.
Can we mention COVID-19?
Chicken.
It's got to be clean.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's clean.
I mean, Peter would be.
Swan.
I would say unclean.
Why? They seem nasty to you.
Yeah, I think of like
They are
the water
hateful.
and just ponds, like not stagnant, but just pond water, and that they would have parasites and just take in a lot of unclean stuff.
Any rebuttals?
No, I'll go with Lee. He sounded good.
No, they're clean. They're in the clean waterfowl category.
Oh, okay.
So obviously they're swimming in a lot cleaner places than what I'm picturing in my mind.
The hard part's catching a swan because they're very mean. They'll attack you, especially if they're nesting. How about a condor?
I don't know what a condor is. I've heard of it. I can't tell you what it looks like.
No, unclean.
Yeah, a condor is a scavenger bird, sort of like a vulture. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. You wouldn't want to eat the meat that eats the meat that's decomposing on the road.
Right.
Ostrich. Those are some big chicken legs on that ostrich.
Not a lot of meat on them, though.
No.
I'm going to say clean.
Yeah, it looks clean.
That's my guess.
No, it's an unclean.
Unclean.
Yeah.
Why?
I didn't write down the verse. I was going to. I had it in there to do, but I can't remember the description of why it would be unclean. The two more flying animals. How about a hawk?
No.
Yeah. I mean, no.
Yeah, they are unclean.
Yeah, they're unclean.
Yeah,
Okay,
unclean.
Sorry.
Yeah, because a hawk is a predator,
Right.
And
Right.
so you want to. It just seems to be consistent that something that eats another animal,
Right.
and we know that from like biology or even ecology, I guess, is the closer you get to eating producers like plants, the healthier it is. But if you get a producer that's eaten by a consumer, and then a consumer eats that consumer, and then by the time you get to it, you've lost out most of the vitamins and everything that would have been in the original plants. And so, because it keeps getting, and so you're just getting all that. So
Sounds like you're arguing we should only eat plants. Back to Lee's topic. Plants are the best for you.
if I didn't like meat so much, I would totally be a vegetarian.
I will agree with you on that, Levi.
And how about a parrot?
I'm going to say unclean.
Yeah, me too.
You don't think we should eat something that talks to you?
I know. I was thinking about that.
I'll say it's clean.
No, they are unclean. Again, I don't remember why, but they would fall under that category, according to my source. I forget what that is. All right, how about insects? We'll go into insects. What kind of these insects can we eat?
All of them are unclean.
All right. How about praying mantis?
No.
Unclean.
Praying mantis is unclean. Crickets.
Clean.
Probably yes.
Crickets are clean.
Or
Locusts.
Yes, clean.
Yes, clean.
Who was it ate locusts and honey?
John?
John
the Baptist.
Yeah. Butterflies.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah, they are unclean. I can narrow it down easy for the insects. The clean ones are insects with jointed jumping legs. The unclean are insects without jointed jumping legs. So if it's cricket-like, grasshopper-like, good to go. And so it's very narrow on insects, as it should be. About land animals, we've got the clean ones, mammals that chew the cud and part the hoof, as a hint, versus unclean, which are land animals do not chew the cud and part the hoof. And that's mutually exclusive. They have to do both. If they don't do one of them, they're right out, just like pigs. Fox,
Are unclean.
is that consensus?
I don't know. Sure, for the sake of time.
Yeah, I think so.
They are unclean, as are all canines. No canines are. That's why we don't eat dog. That's not the only reason we don't eat dog.
Who says?
Goat.
Clean.
I would say
I'm going to
clean.
say clean.
Goat's clean. It's even in. There's a sacrifice for it with a goat, the scapegoat.
Yeah.
Bison.
Clean.
Clean.
Yeah, bison's clean.
I was leaning towards clean. I just wasn't leaning toward the microphone.
Porcupine.
Dangerous.
I'm
Unclean.
going to say unclean.
It would be dangerous,
Yes.
but it comes with its own poke stick, so you can.
It's obscure.
Yeah, it is unclean. Giraffe.
Clean.
Unclean.
Unclean.
A giraffe is actually clean.
Ah.
Cuds and hoofs, or whatever. Camel.
Unclean.
Is unclean.
So unclean. That's what I thought.
I'm going to say clean.
No, camel is unclean.
And I probably would have picked clean, but I remember specifically reading that camels were unclean.
Yeah. And I was thinking the hoofs of a giraffe was similar to that of a camel. That's the reason why I said unclean on the giraffe.
Water animals, the last category here, about mackerel. Oh, by the way, water animals, fish with fins and scales are the
Fins
clean
and
ones.
scales.
No fins or scales, unclean. So a mackerel.
I don't know a lot about them, so I'm just kind of guessing. I'm going to say unclean.
Clean.
Yeah, I don't know either, so I'm going to say clean.
They are clean. And also, my mama used to make mackerel cakes. You could get mackerel in a can like tuna. And she'd make mackerel cakes, sometimes tuna cakes, sometimes salmon cakes. Any kind of thing you could put with bread and cook and fry and eat, I like it. Doesn't mean it's clean or unclean. I just
You said the clean were, say that again?
fish with fins and scales.
Fins and scales.
Yeah.
Okay.
Octopus,
Unclean.
Right.
Unclean.
unclean. That's also doesn't have. I don't think it has scales. Doesn't have fins. Has siphons. They do have them at the buffet sometimes. Though. Little rings. Perch.
Clean?
Clean.
Yeah, clean and tasty. Alligator,
Unclean.
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 definitely unclean. Shrimp,
Unclean.
You sure about that? I'm going to say clean. Not that I think they necessarily are. I eat them.
I'm going with unclean, but
I eat them, and I think they're unclean, but I love them.
well, shrimp are in that category of bottom feeders. They,
Okay,
they clean the
exactly.
bottom of their
That's
sewage
what I
treatment.
was thinking.
Gotcha. Okay.
And also, I would know that instinctively because anytime you broach the topic of whether or not homosexuality is allowed in the Bible or if it was valid, well, why don't you talk about the shrimp verse that's just like 2 verses behind it? And because it talks about not eating shrimp and also about not wearing the different types of fabric in their clothes. But that's a whole nother discussion.
so shrimp are unclean, but they clean?
They're unclean because they clean.
Ah,
Yeah.
Go.
There's no muck on the ground because it's in them now. What about oysters?
unclean.
Yeah, unclean.
Oysters
I
are
would say that. Unclean.
unclean. They actually, you can put oysters in turgid water and they actually clean up the water because they siphon through. They act like little water filters. And how about dolphins?
Unclean.
Unclean.
Yeah.
Dolphins are unclean.
No scales.
No scales.
I would think, just to think of a dolphin, I would kind of think they would be clean, but they don't meet those biblical standards.
That's not to be confused. That's the mammal dolphin. There's also there's a fish called a dolphin, but it's also called the mahi-mahi, which is clean. So if you're going to eat a dolphin, make sure you know which dolphin it is. It can't be Flipper. Those of you who know Flipper from the 1970s will get that joke.
I get
Was
it.
that 70s?
Late 70s, I think.
I wasn't born.
It was in color.
Yeah.
They call him Flipper, Flipper, faster than lightning.
All right. Anybody else got any meat to discuss? All right. Well, thank you for joining us again. Please, if you have any questions or concerns or comments or baskets of meat to send us, please feel free to do so. You can visit our website and do that, sunshinechurchwv.org. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. We are here at the Sunshine Podcast. No, we're not. No, we're not.